Though best known as a contemporary jazz performer, his popularity has spread into the mainstream. He started playing trumpet at the age of 10 and began performing professionally while still in high school. He's worked with Bob Dylan, Aretha Franklin, and Paul Simon. But it was his time accompanying Sting that brought him his greatest notoriety. Through CDs, radio, and PBS television specials, he continues to entertain his ever-growing fan base. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on this episode of InnerVIEWS, our conversation with Grammy Award winner Chris Botti. For you personally, what was the point when you realized you had arrived, that you had made it?
Well, the term "making it" is kind of, wow, that's a big step. But I think that there was a point where I realized when the sound of the trumpet sort of crossed over into that unexpected place that I never maybe would have thought, and that is about a little over 2 years ago when I was asked to perform at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony in Oslo. And I had been in Europe on tour, just really kind of grinding it out, with my band, and as the opening act for Sting, which was an incredible honor. And we were playing in front of a lot of audiences that had never really heard of me. But meanwhile, in the United States, my record was taking off and all this stuff. So we arrived at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony, and then in the morning there was a press conference. And so we walk in, I walk into this press conference, and there were the artists that were going to play the performance that night, and it was Andrea Bocelli, Cyndi Lauper, Patti LaBelle, Diana Krall, and Tony Bennett, and myself. And being the lone instrumentalist in this panel of great musicians, that was the kind of moment where I thought, wow, I'm not just a jazz guy and a bunch of jazz musicians. The jazz guy that's been fortunate enough to maybe cross into that place with all these other great singers, and it was great. It was big fun. It was a cool realization of that at that moment.
Was there a goal when you started of what you wanted to achieve?
I think, and I tell this to a lot of young people, it's like, coming here to play a show for you guys or playing a show tomorrow for someone else, I try to have as much enthusiasm and discipline as I did when I first started. It's just that your scope is different. But you need to, when you're a kid, I don't think that the healthiest thing in the world is going to say, oh, I want to, live on a tour bus and, play tons of concerts. You really think to yourself, can I enthusiastically approach this instrument and figure out a way to play a note without driving my brother and sister or family nuts, can it be pretty? Can I be good? Then can I get a band together with a kid down the street? And then can we actually get a gig? And then can I actually think about going to music school? It's just step by step, and you get into it in a way that you feel if you're disciplined, or I felt that if I was disciplined enough and really focused, that good things would happen. So all along the way, whether it was going to college or then figuring out how I was going to make a living in New York playing the trumpet, all of those things were with the same sort of focus and dedication that I have now. It's just that the stakes are much higher now, but ultimately the plan doesn't change. You just step by step and really go at it with that kind of determination.
Do you make step goals along the way? Is there something right now you're going for? Is there something you have on the radar?
Well, the trumpet is an instrument that really sort of, you can tell by my little red ring here that I was just practicing. It's a very, very unforgiving instrument, and it doesn't care how long you've traveled that day, or if you're not feeling well, or if you're doing tons of press or something like that. When you get up on stage, it will make you pay quickly. So really my goal as I get more experience and more well-known is to retain the fluidity on my horn. That's really important to me, because a lot of things can go wrong with trumpet players. They can have dental problems or back problems or jaw problems or things that you just would not think about, teeth and all that stuff, that can really start to, over months or years, the tide can swim against you, and all of a sudden your sound isn't as pretty, or you don't have the dexterity in the upper register, or you lose it just sounds a little nasally in the lower register, and that to me is my biggest fear. That's really, if I concentrate on that and keep that really at the forefront of my focus, then the other stuff sort of takes care of itself. Once I got trouble with the instrument, and once I'm in trouble with that physically with the instrument, then I don't want to think about that.
Okay, technical question then. The instruments, from different instruments, you will get a different sound. You can tell from different makers probably something slightly different.
No, well,
Because you have favorite instruments that you play.
I just had this.
Right, and you choose this because?
Because this is from 1939, and this little part is from 1926, and this is the same brand of trumpet that Miles Davis played. And so here again, to make things in its simplest form, to make music come down in its simplest form. Musicians and trumpet players especially are the most neurotic, crazy people, right? They will go all over the world to try out different mouthpieces and get really anal about things that maybe perhaps are a detriment to them. I realized, then I had a great teacher, a gentleman in college by the name of Bill Adam, that taught me, to make it its simplest form is best. So I figured this kind of trumpet worked for Miles Davis and Chet Baker. If there was a particular moment in time where I wasn't feeling very good as a player, it's because I hadn't been practicing enough. It's not because of the trumpet.
Okay.
So I figured if I got this horn, that it would just take out all the option anxiety and make me just say, okay, now it's time to practice, forget about the horn.
Okay, but what do you bring as a person to this? Is if anybody had this horn and could blow through it and make music, what do you bring differently when you blow through it?
Well, the trumpet is an incredibly personalized or personal instrument. In other words, if you went up and played a middle C on a piano, probably everyone in this room could go up and play middle C on the piano. It'd be very, very difficult to tell the difference in the actual player. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't really know. But if you hand this trumpet to even like trumpet players and have them play a middle C, it sounds radically different. That's one of the advantages of having a brass player, is that your solo voice, whatever that is, the makeup of a lot of things, your airstream and the way you hear the sound and the way you visualize your trumpet playing comes out radically quick. And that's one of the reasons why people say, "Hey, I'm walking in a supermarket and I can always tell it's you, Chris." You know what I mean? That thing is one of the advantages to playing the trumpet. The disadvantage to playing the trumpet is you got to practice it all the time, and you don't have the advantage of having harmony. You just have one note,
Right.
Whereas piano, you can play all the Bach and, or Herbie Hancock or whatever, and you get all that sort of thing. And the trumpet is just this one solo voice. But in that solo voice, your personality comes out in 0.001 second, and so it is a very stylized instrument to the individual.
Can anyone then be a great trumpet player? Or because it's so involved with the makeup, is there something you have to bring to it just from nature?
I'd love to say anyone can play the trumpet, but I think that certainly there are some hurdles, You get in the wrong habits early on as a kid, and they can mount up, and you might not ever overcome. And also the trumpet, I've done some things and I've met young players, like 9, 10, 11, that are excellent players. And sometimes the trumpet can do a self-imposed ceiling on you. Because you're great at 9 doesn't mean you're going to be that much better at 19. And in reverse, when I was 19, I played the trumpet nothing like I play it now. Like, I'm so much better now as an adult, which is something I'm really proud of. Because, if you look at an athlete's career, they're sometimes much better in their 20s than they are in their 30s than they are in their 40s.
Right.
But I've just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it and kept trying to, find, what's the word I'm looking for? Refine my sense of my playing, and it's just gotten so much better. And so there are things that I could never have played in my teens and 20s that I can now.
So have you plateaued yet? Or
God, I hope not. I hope not.
Yeah. Take me back. What was it that excited you about this instrument from the beginning?
Well, I started playing the piano first, and then I think I saw Doc Severinsen on television. It was the first, and this is the one thing I tell people, especially when it comes down to like PBS and stuff like that, is that the visual connection for young people is so incredibly powerful. That's why a young person sees Michael Jordan and then goes out in his backyard and daydreams about being Michael Jordan. The same is true with an instrument. You get a young person, you see, you have them on looking at the screen, and all of a sudden the next thing they want to do is play cello, like Yo-Yo Ma. Who knows they even heard of a Yo-Yo Ma or Andrea Bocelli or something like that? And those things they had that connection with because the visual thing carries them first. And so I saw Doc Severinsen on The Tonight Show when he was the band leader on The Tonight Show, and I thought that was cool. And so I just tried the trumpet for a couple of years, and then I kind of got into it. And at the same time in my life when I realized I wasn't going to be the next Michael Jordan, in other words, I wasn't going to be a star athlete, I heard Miles Davis. And those kind of things happen simultaneously, and you kind of get your ego in a positive way as a young person takes over where you are. How can I make myself good or different from the other kids and not just a kid that goes to school but actually has some passion about something.
Roughly what age were you at this?
11, 12,
Okay.
What can I do that separates me from all the other kids that maybe could play basketball or could do all that stuff? What is it that I'm going to do, And so I found, the music of Miles Davis, and I was just, that did it for me.
Parents support you, try indifferent towards it? What was that reaction?
My parents supported me, and that's another thing that you bring up that's very interesting, is that, part of the, when you meet parents and they have super young kids, they're at a cocktail party, they're all going to tell you, hey, my son, my daughter, they play all the Beatles songs. I'm telling you, they're going to be the next Paul McCartney. It's great, it's great. Then when they come out of their room, when they're 17, they go, hey, Mom, I really want to go to Berkeley and study music or something. They're like, no, we were kidding. We want you to be a doctor or a lawyer. That's the way that stuff usually works. And so sometimes parents, the encouragement part is huge when you're a young person, but also the ability to back off and let the kid trust in their own gut and do what they want to do. I'm not saying every kid should be a musician. It's a really hard call because parents are in the mix. They're right there with the kid. So they're all wrapped up in their emotions and they want what's best, obviously, for their kid, And so my mom really knew music, and she ultimately just either allowed me to con her or trusted me. I think it's a combination of both, because I was so unbelievably headstrong about it. I mean, I was just like, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to die trying, or I'm going to do it. And I didn't waver from that since I was 13 or 14. It was like, that's it, every single day,
Did you envision where you would go? And it kind of takes me back to what I was asking earlier, but so often you hear people who succeed have a plan. It's just not doing it, but it's understanding where you can go with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had my idols, that I looked up to, and I kind of thought, you don't get really wrapped up in the minutia of what a career is, but I certainly had dreams of being a well-known trumpet player. That was, huge to me, and I wanted to be Miles Davis, or I wanted to be, Chet Baker or something. What really kind of felt like that I had that connection with the instrument that was different than just like, oh, I'm playing the notes on the page, I really felt connected to this thing,
What have you sacrificed for the horn?
Well, I mean, it's funny because I've been on the road pretty much straight since 1999, living with having no residence at all, and I have one large suitcase that all my stuff goes in. So when I buy, the stuff for the spring or the stuff for the winter, all the stuff needs to be taken out of the suitcase and donated, like that. And it's a weird kind of existence. Finally, after 7 or 8 years, this Christmas of 19, or what year?
19?
2006, going into 2007, I finally got my first apartment. I saved my money up and bought this apartment in New York. And I had a friend of mine, this comedian, Caroline Ray, who came to my apartment the other day, and she walked in and she goes, "Now, Botti, just because you have a place doesn't mean you have a life. You don't have a life. That's why your apartment looks like a box, and that's really, in essence, I don't really have much of a life outside of my little dysfunctional family on the road and the absolute gratification that I get from walking on stage. I wouldn't trade it for anything, But the sacrifices you make if you really want to do this, see, because you can do a music video and you can become a pop star overnight. Mm-hmm. But to be an instrumental artist that reaches a lot of people, the ascent is so much more difficult and so much slower. And the process of the awareness by the general public takes just so much longer, because they can't attach like a little catchy hook to something. They got to get involved with it over time and be familiar with the sound of my trumpet over a little bit more time. And that makes it a much harder ascent.
Tell me a little about working with Frank Sinatra.
Well,
I like that pause.
I think that I envision it as a great working relationship. I think he envisioned it like, could you get me a bagel, son? It was like one of those things. But it wasn't a huge, long deal. It was a 2 or 3 week engagement at the Universal Amphitheater. I dropped out of college to be a part of this, and I turned up to sound check, and Sinatra was there, and they called a particular song called "Fly Me to the Moon." I mean, he's just going through the paces. It's sound check for him, 1 in a million, right? And there's a very, very famous trumpet solo in the middle of Fly Me to the Moon. And they say that if you get in a car accident, you see your whole life flash before you, prior to the accident. Well, this was like as the measures counted down to that trumpet solo. I saw my whole life passing. I was so nervous, and I stood up to play the solo, and I played the solo, and Frank Sinatra, actually being just a polite person, said, "Nice solo, kid," because I must have looked like, I was 21, I looked like Opie, like, it's hilarious. And so he was just being nice, and he said, "Nice solo, kid." And so I had these crazy notions that, me and Frank Sinatra were going to, like, hang out in Palm Springs together or something, like, with some scotch and a couple of blondes.
Yeah.
Or something. I don't know, it was like a weird notion. So I went up and talked to him on the coffee break, and I made a complete dunce out of myself, I suppose.
What did you say?
I was just like, well, Mr. Sinatra, would you want me to play my solo more like this or more like that? And he said, "No, it sounds fine. Do whatever you want." And again, he was a consummate professional and turned around and walked away. And his assistant, she put her arm around me and said, "Don't bother Mr. Sinatra again." I kind of like shrunk.
Are there certain people that you play with that it changes the way you viewed them? And I'm talking more the names that you come across, like the Frank Sinatra or others of that ilk. When you actually work with them, does it change your view of them?
Not really. I mean, there are people that I've worked with that I can just say, like, for instance, I toured with Joni Mitchell and her band, and she talks all day long, right? And when she's driving, when we're in the van driving from the hotel to the airport, she'll just do running commentary on whatever is going on. And I'm just going like, well, if someone had a microphone and a tape recorder, you could tape 5 Joni Mitchell lyrics to songs because it's so visual. She'll just start talking about that farmhouse. Look at the way that farmhouse is, and just she'll paint this image with her just running her mouth. And I'm going like, this is Joni Mitchell sitting here talking like this. It's art. It's art. And she doesn't really, she probably isn't necessarily aware of it, but it's just all in her. Everything she is Joni Mitchell. It's just like, with the love and with the passion comes the neuroses and comes the ability to draw these things with her lyrics and stuff. And, the people that are really, really great, they're just really great in a lot of things. Certainly my best friend, and one of them is Sting, and like he's broken my career to the whole world. Right. And he's got that same thing in so many different ways, He's got that, discipline and ability to just be Sting in so many different ways, It's very interesting. And Paul Simon the same way, like all the cliches that people say about Paul Simon, he's all up here in his head and he's very thoughtful and thinking like that and all that. He's that way. You go out to dinner with him and you're just like, whoa, man, he's up in the clouds with all these esoteric kind of thought processes and stuff. It's just, people are in some way a little bit like their persona. I mean, maybe privately there are aspects to them that aren't, but in a lot of ways they are,
Do you prefer touring with someone or touring on your own?
My favorite is touring with my band. There's nothing more gratifying than to go up, on stage with my band. That said, when we've done some double bills and tried to reach out to huge, massive audiences of people that have never heard me, that's fun. Going on the road, and doing that double bill with Sting, which was a blast. In a lot of ways, it did amazing things for my career.
Talking about things that did amazing things for your career, Caroline Rhea, you mentioned her earlier. How did you end up being the sidekick on the Caroline Rhea show?
I went on the show just to promote my Christmas album, just like anyone would do a presentation on a play on a talk show. I didn't know anything.
Now, were you friends already or not friends yet?
Not at all. Okay. Didn't know Caroline at all. Never even met her. Walked on. She'd been backstage in the dressing room. I went on. I played, and she was sitting over there at her couch. And so I get through playing, and the first thing I do is I take my horn off my face, and the first thing she gives me is this fastball, like there's some verbal thing, It's just, and I was like, whoa, and like so I swung back in a way, and then we had this little interaction, but still never met. And so she asked me, like, on air, "Hey, Botti, you want to come back tomorrow and play another song?" And I'm like, well, that's very unique because usually, if you've seen any talk shows, they don't have the artist back the next day. Right. I said, yeah, sure. Still hadn't met her. The next day I came back on the show. Same thing. I play a Christmas song. She does a little barb we get along, and she goes, why don't you sit here and finish out the show with me? And I'm like, huh, and so we sit down, and we just had this connection. She's very, very similar to hanging out with a jazz musician. It's just so quick and so hilarious. And we played at the legendary Blue Note Club in New York recently, and she came on stage and just cut me up. Like, she brought us on stage, but she did a little stand-up before, and she's just one of my favorite people in the world. She's so funny.
How quick did you realize the impact being on television day in and day out is going to have on your career? Because I'm sure suddenly people knew you that had no idea who you were, weren't into this kind of music at all, that were just watching daytime talk.
What? Well,
How
once
quick
we were
do
on
you realize?
Once we were on Oprah, and once Oprah gave us the endorsement, my whole life changed in one 5-minute instance.
Do you feel it immediately?
Yeah, and the funny thing was that we were in Dublin, Ireland, and there's a time change, right? So we were in Dublin, Ireland, performing to an audience that I must say I had a terrible night that night. I mean, I thought I wasn't on my game. I thought the audience was kind of looking at me like a dog does to a ceiling fan, like, huh? And we played the show, and I just wasn't very good at all, And so we walked off stage, and I said to Jeremy, my tour manager, I said, well, maybe there's some good news about the Oprah. Let's see is there any way because I'm not very internet savvy. I said, is there any way we can find out about how we did in the Oprah show? And he goes, well, we can go to Amazon.com and see how your record's doing. So we pulled up Amazon, and within 5 minutes or 10 minutes at the end of the Oprah show, we'd gone to #1 on Amazon, sat there for 10 days, ahead of, this is my favorite part, the second band on Amazon was U2. So I had our one of the crew guys make me a little poster of the thing that says, Amazon, Chris Botti #1, U2 #2. And I was kind of going around Ireland like, now I don't know who's these guys.
Who's these U2 people?
Who's this U2?
After something like that, then, what do you have to do as an artist, a performer, an entertainer to stay up there? Because there's going to be a little drop after an Oprah appearance.
No, really?
Right, yeah.
Oh,
so what do? Are you planning for that? Are you thinking about it? How do you now keep that momentum going?
I think that the window of the real pop culture part of being able to cross over an instrumentalist is it has a finite length to it, and all I can really do is just give it my all and just try to tour as much as I can, be grateful for the fans that get a night off and come with their family, and that's really all I can do. The other stuff is sort of out of my power.
Yeah.
But certainly we followed up the great opportunity of being on Oprah with our PBS special, and that's the thing I'm most proud of. That particular night, that moment, that when everyone was there, and that's something that in the course of my career that will never be taken away from me. They'll always have, because it's one thing, you can always say, oh, I wish you were there that night at the club in XYZ city, right?
Yeah.
But when you actually say, we all had it working that night, it felt loose and carefree, and it was shot beautifully and recorded beautifully, and it will be an album forever for the rest of my life. Those are the things that you benchmark your career by, and that's something I'm really proud of. So that's really aided in a lot of things for us.
Yeah, not to flip that the other way, but when you say that and it's there forever, when you're making a record then, are you conscious that every moment, everything that goes down there is going to last now forever? So does that put a lot more stress on you to make sure when you're recording something, when you're doing something that's be it a show or a recording, are you much more attuned to that the whole time?
No.
Or do you escape from that?
I don't think you ever escape from it, but I think I was just as neurotic and uptight and aware of it when it didn't matter. When I was doing my demos to try to get a record deal, the same thing about, can I play with a kid around the street? Can I make a band? Can I make a living in New York? When I was first making my demo tapes to try to get, a record deal, I thought it was like the most, important thing. This is like it. You go into all these things with the exact same focus. It's just undaunting. You just cannot lose. It's not like, oh, now we've sold a lot of records, so now things are different. If you do that, you lose sort of touch. You've got to still be, as serious and as focused as you were at all times, I think.
Yeah.
And then also it works in reverse. Some people get really huge, and then they just become like, you know what, you do the tracks, I'll come in and play on them. And I've played on lots of records where artists come in and sing like that, and you can just tell they're just phoning it in, or they don't have the knowledge to know the difference, and it's sad. I don't really ever want to be that, like that. But I think by paying attention, you can kind of, you can't always help the pop culture pendulum, because it will always swing like this.
Right.
But by paying attention to your music, you'll at least assure yourself of operating on a high level. That is paying attention by surrounding yourself with the best musicians, the best arrangers, the best engineers, the best studios, and the best record company. If you can take care of that, then you got a shot.
If I were to talk to the people that you work with, though, that do these recordings with you, how would they view you?
Say I'm a terrible person and mean, and yell at everyone.
Well, when you talk about trying to achieve something special, when you're trying to do the best work you can, I think in a lot of cases there's opportunity to come across as a bit demanding, difficult to work with.
I'm not. It's weird. Like I can be demanding and neurotic with myself, but I certainly, one thing I have is I really allow great musicians to shine. And when you see my show, you'll know, like, when you see Billy Childs or you see Billy Kilson and you see Mark Whitfield, not only do I feel that they've had a platform for their music, but the more difficult thing is a platform for their personality to come out on stage. It's a really tough thing, because if you look at most pop bands right now, there's the performer in the front and the musicians in the back are faceless, right? They don't have it. But when you look at Miles Davis, when Miles Davis would walk to the side of the stage to give his chops a rest, so I didn't get all beat up like you were looking up at the future of jazz. Herbie Hancock, Keith Jarrett, Wayne Shorter, whoever it was, John Coltrane, and Miles knew that by surrounding himself with the best. Tony Williams at 17, and the audience is like, oh my God, and so he became not only the greatest jazz musician, but a tastemaker, that everyone turned to, And Oprah does it in modern day stuff, but Miles did it with jazz musicians, And so I've really tried to make it so I surrounded myself with the best and let them do their thing, and me sit cradled in the middle of it.
Well, we're happy that you do what you do and that you're sharing it with us today. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you very much.
Chris Botti.
Thanks.
To order a transcript, call 866-652-3378 or send $6.95 to the address on your screen. Please include the name of the guest.